Hello and welcome to Catholic Focus. I am Kudamatambo. More than 600 people have died in Malawi and up to 2 million have been affected by tropical Cyclone Freddy. The situation is dire and a lot of people need help. But to understand deeper what is happening in Malawi today and also how dire the situation is, we're going to talk to Brother Ngonidzashe Edward, who is the director of Jesuit Centre for Ecology and Development in Malawi. Brother Ngoni, welcome to Catholic Focus.
Thank you, Kuda.
Tell us, what is happening in Malawi today?
Kuda, Malawi is recovering from this disaster, which all of us, we've seen, Cyclone Freddy. Cyclone Freddy, what it did to Malawi was unprecedented. We saw something which we're prepared and we're not prepared for. We're prepared for it to come, but we did not realize the amount of damage it was going to cause. So right now, if you ask me what's happening in Malawi, I think we are now in the process of recovering, healing, and rebuilding. Recovering from this, as you know, as you've already mentioned it, that we are talking about more than 600 people who have died. But not only just 600 people who died, there are more than 500 people missing. We don't know where they are. We know for sure that they've died, but we are not able to find them. There's been a lot of rescue. The Malawi Defense Forces were going with the sniffer dogs to try to, because see, what happened with this, there was a lot of mudslide happening. So a lot of people are buried under the mud. And now, it's now almost a month after. In fact, on the 13th, we're celebrating a month after the cyclone hits Malawi. So right now, communities are now starting to, you remember there was an excitement and people coming out to respond to help. But right now, the communities that have been affected, they are now being left alone, and now the toll started making sense to them. So issue of healing, issue of trauma, issue of rebuilding. Right now, we need to move out people from the camps. There are about 577 camps which were set up. And these camps were more in the schools and in our churches and the communities. And right now, again, we have to now start the conversation of where do we take these people? Schools are opening. So those places where they were housed, the displaced, there were more than 600,000 people displaced. So we talked about, in terms of people have been affected, about 2.3 million have been affected. So right now, Malawi starts to respond because the work is now, the work of recovery, the work of rebuilding. So that's what's happening, especially with our different teams, CADCOM, Malawi, World Food Program, all kinds of people who are working. This is now the work which we are now talking about. As
JC ED, you've visited several communities, like you've mentioned, people now need healing. What have you been doing?
So as JCD, of course, the humanitarian assistance, we started by emergency response. Yeah, for the past few weeks, it has been, where do we get food? Where do we get blankets, so-called? Where do we get temporary shelter? So as JCD, we went and also we mobilized, we made an appeal. I think you're also helping us to make an appeal. So we've been really have people who have been responding to that, but really about food. But now, as I said, it's now about shelter now. How do we build houses? But not just only, this whole thing about building back better, houses that are resilient. Now, there is a challenge. Most of the places they are places that, what I call not disaster in waiting, but disaster in a place. The way the housing is, the way they are on the mountains, the way the mudslide is going to happen. So again, the problem of Malawi is not yet over. Just a little rains, they come through, that disaster in place is going to happen. So again, the question of us going there, we went there, we saw, it was painful. It was painful.
This is not the first time you're going into the communities that have been affected by tropical cyclone. Before COP27 in Egypt, you did a solidarity mission Caravan of Hope, going into the communities that were affected by tropical cyclones. We're talking about Chimanimani, Chipinge, that were affected by Cyclone Idai. You went into Beira, you went into Malawi as well. What was this mission about, and what new lessons did you learn from the people affected?
Thank you for that. So when we moved around, and this is connected to what's happening now, when we were moving around, we moved what we call the Caravan of Hope. So it was that, in fact, the theme was healing the earth, healing the people, because we need to heal the earth. We need to restore the earth, but also we need to heal our people. And why healing our people? It was all about how these cyclones have been affecting this region. Malawi, Zimbabwe, Mozambique. I mean, Mozambique is like the gate for all these things. All these cyclones come through Mozambique, and the way they've destroyed, our communities, the kind of loss our communities feel, loss of life, loss of livelihoods, loss of cultures, loss of dreams. It's quite serious. So part of the Caravan of Hope was to, how do you bring hope? How do you minister? How do you accompany? How do you journey with the people who are experiencing this pain, this suffering, this disaster? And so when we're going to this community, so one of the things was for us to go, to listen to their stories. I think this is very, very critical. Listen to their stories, to journey with them. But not only that, but also to amplify, because we're moving with young people. They learn, they listen, but they tell this story, because this story has to be told. And this be told, and you've mentioned COP27 and COP28 was coming. Remember COP27, we're talking about trying to mobilize around issues of loss and damage facility. So people will ask you, what does climate change looks like? Its impact. And we wanted to show them, look at these communities. Look how communities are being affected. Look how our lives are being destroyed. Look how our children's future is being destroyed. And this is our climate change. So when we did that, and we have young people telling that story in art, in other creative means, that was critical for us. So again, that Caravan of Hope, not only was it just a caravan that is bringing hope, but also it was a caravan that was meant to amplify voices of those who are most affected by this thing. And who are these people? They're the people who are on the front lines. The communities in Beira, in Chimanimani, in Chikwawa. And now we're talking about Blantyre, Chiladzu, Palombe, all these communities of people in the villages who really, even the way to respond, they don't have much even capacity to respond. So we needed to tell their story, and that was part of the Caravan of Hope.
You talk about healing and hope and people listening. Several parishes in Zimbabwe have been mobilizing resources to help with the response in Malawi due to the damage that was done by Cyclone Freddy. But do you think the world is listening?
I would first like to thank people who have been generously responding to this. I think these times they make all of us move our hearts to do this. So, and when we see people who can see that our neighbor or the house of our neighbor is on fire and they do something, I think this is commendable. So really, it's something which I would want to acknowledge that. But is the world listening? The world is listening, but it's not listening to the story of the poor.
What are the actual cries?
So the cry, for the poor person, the cry is to say, I had my field. This way I got the source of my food security. It's gone. The cry of the poor is I had a house. Poor as it was, but it was a shelter, but it's gone. The cry of the poor is look, I had a culture, I had a community, I belonged to somewhere, but now I'm displaced. I don't belong anywhere. So the cry of the poor is to say, I've not done much to cause this situation, climate change, You, because of your industrialization, because of your consumption, because of your wasteful culture, you have been fueling this. And I am the one who's suffering from it. So why is that I'm not even supported? Why is that you are not assisting me to live? Because remember, and this is the gospel, isn't it, of Christ, that He came to give us life and to give us to the life to the full. Why am I not experiencing the fullness of life? Because remember, what this does is that it makes people not to experience the fullness of life. And I should experience the fullness of life.
Okay.
And that's the cry of the poor. And the cry of the poor is a cry of justice. That's what I mean. It's cry of justice. There is justice that is needed in this situation.
Okay, let's break this down. The church in Zimbabwe, we had an interview with the Bishop of Mufumtare, who was also very instrumental in the response post-Cyclone Freddy period. And one of his suggestions was that the church should have in place a response mechanism in terms of food, in terms of shelter, somewhere where people who are affected by cyclones or tropical cyclones or any of these natural disasters could get immediate help. What do you think must be done now by governments and also by the church?
I mean, I think he's right, he's just right on point there, that we now need some kind of structure, some kind of organization to organize ourselves to respond. Because the fact, and we saw the recent IPCC report, the fact is that this is here to stay. Because we've already damaged Mother Earth. So Mother Earth is hitting back. There's a correction which is happening. So what part of it means that we have these, it's either, if it is not cyclone, it's a drought, there's always going to be one disaster that is linked to climate change. So which means as a church, through our works of charity, works of mercy, we need to position ourselves. How do we respond? How do we minister? How do we accompany? How do we support? So the question of having something in place, that question, we should not be talking about it right now, because should be that what should be doing. But I think what is much more as well is Southern Africa. We need to now create synergies, because see, the thing about the climate change, it does not affect Zimbabwe as Zimbabwe or Malawi as Malawi. It affects us as a bloc. So the power of response is when we respond together. We respond together, but it's not about response, because response should be another. It's also about when we prepare together. We warn, when we look, when you look at it, you look at Madagascar, it starts coming. You see, so how do we support each other in our preparation and in our response? So definitely having more of a kind of a network around that. From now we're talking about from a church perspective, a church network on that, but also a reflection network where we actually reflect, what does this mean? Because to us, from what we witnessed to, from our mission of justice, of social justice and climate justice. So a church organizing ourselves to say, in terms of ministering, accompanying, but in terms of advocacy, because the church is good. Because like what I was telling you, that most of the people are in churches and our schools. So which means the voice for advocating for these communities, we have got a strong voice as church. So how do we come together as a church network to respond to that? But also, how do we then work with the governments? This is a kind of crisis where we don't want to find ourselves like fighting each other. I think there is an issue of complementarity here. How do we complement the work? And that's what but at the same time, again, of course, as a church, after we've completed with work, how do we also be watchdogs? But there's a lot of also resources, money and time. How do we ask our government to say, you received this, you did this, what have you done? So that work also is part of what, as a church, working with the government and other people, we should be doing.
Earlier on, you mentioned about loss and damage and how we need to have conversations around how we maybe compensate these communities that are losing a lot because of the tropical cyclones. But do you think, I mean, I know this is one of your strengths as Jesuit Centre for Ecology and Development, you know, to reach out, to engage communities. But how much of climate education is out there? And what are the key messages that people need to know and to start thinking about?
So, education, what is education? I like the ways of climate education. I think our people are educated about the climate. Especially most of our people are farming communities, so they are always looking up and see what's happening. So they have that education. But, and I think that's the but, do they have a movement for voicing what they know and what they want? I think that is within, in that conjuring that movement. So it's not just because it is there, you've got pockets, but conjuring it into a great force that will be heard, because a lot of issues also has to do with the politics, the structure of things, the structure of even the global economic systems, which needs to be, you know, we talk about speaking truth to power. And so that movement is to speak the truth of the experience of how they are experiencing, what they are experiencing to those that. So I don't think it's about their education, but it's about how are we mobilizing the communities to speak their truth. And their truth is that we are dying and you are killing us.
When you visited communities, what impression did you get of young people?
Getting into the community, the first thing which I saw was the dark cloud. You know, I've never seen this dark cloud. You know, when I saw this dark cloud. In that dark cloud, you know what I felt? It was fear. And you could see, and when I went to the communities, you could see that fear, that hopelessness which comes with this. Because this hopelessness is not, see, the thing about, the terrible thing about what's happening with these climate disasters which are happening is that not only are they coming to us in the midst of other problems, they are coming to us in our communities that are poor. So already there's a whole poverty issues happening. Communities that do not have employment. So young people are not employed. They are like all over, loafing around, nothing. So they don't have kind of, then you, on top of it, you have got this thing happening. So I could feel it. And that's why we started talking about Caravan of Hope. How in the midst of these young people who seems to be fighting this big thing, how do we inspire hope? How do we inspire resilience? But how do we inspire the future we want? And there is, you know, and young people are emerging. There is a whole, you know, we talk about people like Green Magis, we talk about Youth for Climate Justice, we talk about, like now we are now talking about the community themselves, young people mobilizing, supporting, but that needs to be, the inspiration for that needs to be, we call it, activated more, you know, because I work with a lot of young people who are artists. Not only do we call it activated, we call it activated with art, and then, you know, being mobilized, that spirit to come. Because I think that story needs to be told of how young people are stepping up to the challenge.
So let's talk about what are your next steps as JCED or as a movement, you know, responding to the crisis that's at hand. What are you going to do? What are your next steps as JCED?
So yes, you've asked about what is our next steps. Right now, we are still working in responding to the response. We are on the response, immediate response. But the next step is about how do we assist communities to rebuild. I know that. So, I mean, we've got thousands and thousands of people who are displaced. So we need to come up with some. So we will launch it together with Caravan Malawi. We are launching a campaign around rebuilding together, because we are not able to do it ourselves. So we are launching a campaign of rebuilding together, and that rebuilding together, it will look on three things. So rebuilding is part of recovery. So how do we help community to recover? So rebuilding lives. So it's also rebuilding shelter. So that's one of the things, but also our even psychological states. So healing, rebuilding persons, coming together for that. That is for us a key thing. But also rebuilding the kind of structures in the communities that help, because the structures in the community have been destroyed. I mean, most people have been displaced. So how do we rebuild our organization in terms of that? So we'll be launching that. In fact, we'll be launching that in the first week of May. We've started the Ngonidzashe month. So Ngonidzashe month will then start that campaign for recovery and rebuilding, also helping those who want to be resettled and others. So there's there's going to be a lot of conversation, and some of the good conversations are going to be painful. It's going to be painful to say, you know what, where you stay, because you stay in the disaster-prone area, you need to move. So you know what it comes. I mean, for our people to move from one place to another. So there's going to be a lot of tough conversations that are going to happen.
Brother Ngwan, thank you very much for telling this story. Painful as it is, working with these people, stressful, difficult as it is. If you were to talk to the people in Zimbabwe, the people in Africa, the people in the world watching Catholic Focus today, what would you say to them?
I would say, using what is written here, because it's part of the theme which we've put for the Caravan of Hope now, that we are in this together. Now, what does that mean? It means all of us, you and me, whether we're experiencing it or we are not experiencing it, we're in this together. So what do? We need to prepare together. When the disaster strikes, we need to do what we can do, all of us together. But also we need to be able to journey together out of this. And part of what do you do? What can you do? If you are a media person, what stories are you saying about this? If you are somebody who's a business leader, what are you doing about that? If you are a church person, what are you doing about that? If you are a young person, what are you doing about that? Because we are in this together, this is affecting all of us. You know, the thing of saying, climate change is for other people. No. So this is the story. So this is what I would tell. Look, we are in this together. And that should be the basis of our mobilization and our coming together, because we need to come together, and we should not wait as Africa, as Malawi, as Zimbabwe. We should not wait for, they'll bring donations and what. No, we need to really come together and do what we can. So yes, that's my message. We are in this together.
Okay, thank you very much. And there you have it. The situation in Malawi still needs your help. And like Ngoni said, we are in this together. So let's help each other respond to this crisis and also help communities prepare. For me and the crew behind the scenes, it's bye for now.